we acquired the property, half of the units did not have hot water. So our property was losing about $46,000 a year. We spent $300 on a plumber to go swap out a single valve. We added over $600,000 in value to that property, literally by paying somebody $300.
Yeah.
We just poured all of our capital into the fourplex. And then when we closed the hotel, we distributed about just under $250,000 in acquisition fees. Ask yourself, how do I solve this problem rather than like, I can't solve this problem.
Welcome to another edition of Lifetime Cash Flow through Real Estate Investing. And I am thrilled that you're here, and you are going to get tremendous value from the dynamic guy I've got in my studio today. His name is Gideon Spencer, and he's got an awesome podcast called The Hunt for Incredible, which I'm going to be on shortly. And we're going to have a lot of fun today talking about tech. We're going to talk about building teams. We're going to talk about boutique hotels and regular hotels. So strap on. Welcome, brother.
Thanks, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. You've got your lovely bride here today. Yeah, and so let's get into it. So why don't you talk a little bit about your background? I know you've got a lengthy tech background, and you've incorporated that knowledge base into what you're doing now and what you've done. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I spent about a decade in the tech space, and the models in terms of how you structure your team and how you approach problems in tech is very dynamic. So we leverage something called agile. It's a methodology where you basically position yourself and your team in a way where you can make quick decisions. So the concept is that it's difficult to anticipate when there are roadblocks and setbacks. And so it's ideal to position your team in a way where you can quickly pivot to respond to those changes and setbacks. And so what I did when I pivoted into boutique hotels was I applied those same methodologies, and that's what enabled me to jump into this space so quickly. So I acquired $6.5 million worth of real estate within the first 2 years of diving into the space. And I didn't know a single person who even worked at a hotel, let alone owned a hotel. But by applying these systems and techniques, we were able to quickly pivot and adjust and bring great people on our team, bring in mentors, and create what are called asymmetric returns, where you reduce the downside risk and you increase the upside risk so that you can increase the odds of getting the returns that you're looking for.
Interesting. Well said. Well, you know, the tech industry, because they've got the print money, have the ability to hire the best advisors and consultants to come up with these strategies. I've heard of Agile, actually. I've heard about that strategy before. It's an acronym, isn't it, as well?
So there are acronyms within Agile, but Agile itself is.
Gotcha. Okay. That reason that the growth in tech has been explosive is because of this team dynamic, and why companies like Google and Meta and a lot of these other large tech companies have just they put the best people they can together. They cut them loose. They give them a little bit of guidelines, and so I'd love to hear more about your strategy as it relates to that and how you incorporated it. So you left tech. Why did you leave tech, though? You're probably making great money.
Yeah, so I ended up leaving tech because, so long story short, my wife and I were both from San Antonio, but neither of us lived there at the time, and we wanted to get a short-term rental so we could stay in town for the holidays. With my tech background, I'm constantly thinking about economies of scale, so I said if I'm going to buy a property, I want to fit as many doors under one roof as possible. So we went ahead and bought a fourplex. We fixed it up.
In San Antonio?
In San Antonio, and automated 95% of it. And throughout this process, it began printing money, so I wanted to scale it up. But during that period, my wife ended up becoming very ill. So she started getting some brain fog. She had a hard time stringing sentences together. Her migraines were bad. Wow. We took her to the doctor, and they ran all of her blood work, and it came back negative. So the doctor said, everything looks normal. We don't know what's going on. Her health continued to decline to the point where she was completely bedridden. Wow. And had a hard time forming words and sentences. And of course we were terrified. And there were many nights where I held her and we were both crying because there was nothing that we could do. And again, took her to 10 more doctors, and they all said, we don't know what's wrong with her. Within that same 4-month period, my mom got a form of liver cancer that only had a 20% survival rate. And my dad was rushed to the ER with heart failure, and they said he needed a heart transplant.
Good
so literally within 4 months, all of the closest people to me were at death's door. And I had to have a lot of long, hard conversations with God saying, like, dude, there's literally nothing I can do. Like, just you experience those, and you talk about this all the time also, like the mindset that's created from going through the pits. And while I would never want to go back to those moments, and I never wish them upon anybody, I'm so thankful for the lessons that I was able to pull out of that experience.
The strength you pull as well.
100%. And one of those pieces of wisdom was, we all map out against the average life expectancy how much time we have left, but none of that's actually guaranteed. And so from there, I realized that if anything happened to me, with my wife being bedridden, she couldn't work at the time, I needed, like, if I got hit by a bus or anything happened to my health, her quality of life would plummet. And so I wanted to scale my portfolio and grow wealth in a way where I could put a team in place, and that those assets and wealth would appreciate without me even being involved, to make sure that she was taken care of. So then that, in combination with what we had done with our fourplex, I saw boutique hotels as a great vehicle to do that. So pulled a team together, started targeting boutique hotels, and scaled up from there.
So, well, first of all, is she okay?
Yeah, no, she's doing great now.
Yeah. You figured it out?
Recovery.
You figured it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
It turned out that it was she got long COVID, and her nervous system was responding negatively to it, and none of that shows up on blood panels. So once we figured out it was a nervous system issue.
You got the vaccine too, didn't you? No, you didn't? Oh, wow.
No,
I thought it was vaccine generated. My daughter got cancer after the vaccine, and I know 4 people that got cancer after the vaccine. So we won't go down that political rabbit hole, but I thought maybe that was it. You know, I will tell you, just as an aside, just because you're here and I can tell you're a sweetheart and you care about her so much, I consider stem cells. I went down to Tijuana, got stem cells in my knees. There were people there for all kinds of things, and man, some of the stuff has been miraculous.
I have a friend who he tore like a rotator cuff or something, and his shoulder was never the same for like 5 years, and then he got stem cells, and he said it healed him.
Yeah, no, I my knees are much better. I went down to Tijuana. You know, Joe Rogan talks about it. It's called CPI stem cells. There's also in Panama as well. I saw Tony Robbins talk about it, but just as an aside, might be something to consider. But anyway. Back to real estate. So, and I'm glad you're okay, sweetheart. Yeah. So, so boutique hotels. So, well, first of all, let's back up for a minute. So let's talk about agile, if you don't mind. Talk about what that, how that team dynamic works, how you pick the team, and then how you work through. I mean, we don't have to go total micro on this, but I'm curious for my own right, because I've got teams. What that looks like, and how you deal with conflict, how you deal with bumping up against a wall, things like that, as the team is growing and evolving and all that. So if you'd speak to that.
Yeah, of course. So I'll tease out a few elements that apply directly to real estate and enabled me to move so quickly in the space. So number one is cross-functional teams. So you want people on a small team that have high levels of communication with each other, communicating every single day about what they did yesterday and what they're doing that day. It's it's called a stand-up. It can be as short as 5 minutes, where we all literally just hop on. We say, what did you do yesterday? What did you do today? And we have a board with all the things that need to be done. That's the first thing. The second thing, touching on the cross-functional team. On my team, we had somebody who was an absolute wizard in finances, who could run underwriting models incredibly well. And somebody with strong renovation experience. And then I was doing a lot of outreach and underwriting and creating content and just pushing out what we were doing. Additionally, something that's leveraged heavily in software that we applied to this is what's called A/B testing. So basically, we applied it to virtually everything. When we were looking for deals, we would say, like, okay, we talked to brokers, we talked to bird dogs, and we talked to hotel owners. What gave us the best form of leads? And we would touch base every week and say, like, okay, we're experimenting with new methods of increasing deal flow. What worked the best for us? And then we would lean heavily into that.
A/B testing in your outbound marketing relating on social, or
we did A/B testing with everything. So basically, what A/B testing is when you try 2 methods of something, and then you see the results, and you lean heavily into one method. So people do this a lot with newsletters, for example. They'll have 2 different headers for the newsletter, and then they'll see which one did best, and then whichever one did best, that's the
ads as well.
Exactly.
You can have a headline on
well.
an ad. We do the same thing on ads, A/B test ads.
Totally.
With different headlines, different content, different colors, everything.
Totally, yeah. And so we would do that across the board with virtually everything. Because my partners and I, we were newer in the space. We had backgrounds in like mergers and acquisitions and building businesses and things like that, but we'd never bought boutique hotels together before. And so we applied it to...
So your finance guy had M&A experience as well then?
Yeah, the finance guy had M&A experience. We all had experience in real estate in some form or another.
Okay.
All of us had short-term rentals and things like that. So we did have momentum in the space. But we applied it to our buy box. So we take our buy box and say like, okay, what does the return profile look like, and what does the supply in the space look like for our buy box? And we'd go through, look at
geographically specific, I assume.
Yeah, geographically specific. We did it with markets. We did it with deal flow. We did it with investors. What types of investors are more willing to open up their wallets? And we found engineers and lawyers were really difficult. And then people in tech space who are typically
IT professionals.
Who were like product managers or higher level management, they tended to be much more open with their wallets. Also, people who had backgrounds in mergers and acquisitions, they understood investing and were well capitalized as well. So we basically, through our A/B testing, would reflect and say like, okay, what types of investors do we want to target, and like, what is our pitch, right? So then we'd split test or A/B test our pitch and say like, okay, what actually spikes emotion in people?
You're talking about a verbal
excited,
pitch?
A verbal pitch. We did the same thing with copy. So I created basically multiple one-pagers for the deal that we ended up raising capital for. We raised
specific avatars?
Right,
Did you do that
specific
as well?
avatars. So yeah, basically all across the board, we were doing A/B testing on everything to refine what types of deals do we want to go for? Who do we want to raise capital from? How do we want to approach this game as a whole? And through that, ended up really rapidly getting to the type of deal we wanted, the market we wanted, the team we wanted, and then that set us up nicely to be able to bring on mentors that could actually be a part of the deal, not just looking over the deal, but invested with us and going through the challenges of an acquisition together.
Okay. So you got a boutique hotel. Where is it? Where's it located?
It's in Solvang, California.
Where?
Which is Solvang, California.
Solvang.
It's a little Danish-esque town. They call it the Denmark of America.
Oh, interesting.
It's about an hour and a half away from LA, 45 minutes from Santa Barbara. And the reason we picked that market is because it's a regional travel market.
Okay.
And it basically means it's a market where a lot of people travel, and because it's within an hour and a half of a major metro, we find that during economic challenges, people don't stop traveling, they just change their travel habits. So rather than flying to Europe for a week, they'll drive down to Central California wine country for the weekend.
So you're appealing to the LA crowd basically for a weekend getaway or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how many doors in the hotel? Just curious.
So this property is a 24-unit hotel.
24 unit. Okay. And what defines a boutique? I mean, I want to hear your words. And what defines a boutique hotel?
Yeah, so a boutique hotel is any hotel that typically has less than 50 units.
Okay.
That is not tied to what's called a flag or a brand like Marriott. So it's something that can be unique in its offering and differentiated in terms of style and experience, and is smaller. And we find that those deals tend to be too big for the little guys and too small for the big guys. So we're not competing with institutional investors, and we're also not competing with people who are going for smaller short-term rentals and things like that. So it's a nice little sweet spot that we found we can maximize the return on. Are
you vertically integrated in that? You're doing the management as well?
So we're not doing the management, but we have somebody on our team with 25 years of management experience.
So you've got someone on the team that's managing it, rather than using a hotel management company, or?
Correct.
Okay. I heard Joe Rogan talk about a boutique hotel in Austin and how there used to be vagrants there and they turned it all around. I wish I could remember the name of the hotel, but I guess it's really cool. They've got memorabilia there from different things and things like that. Is there anything unique do you have plans to do anything that's kind of sets you apart? Or, speak to that a little bit. I assume you don't have a restaurant or anything like that, but is there anything unique?
Correct. Yeah, we avoid restaurants just because it's added complexity, and they're very difficult for multiple reasons we could dive into. But our core differentiator is we have the largest outdoor space of any other hotel in Solvang.
Okay.
And not only that, but we have 2 of them. So we have a massive front garden and a massive back garden, which gives us a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
And with it being in Central California, the weather's fantastic 90% out of the year. And it being in wine country, we have a lot of partnerships set up with local vineyards so people can have wine outside.
Oh, cool.
And then we can also host weddings in a way that no other property in the area can.
Oh, very cool. Okay, yeah, that's a different differentiator. So what's next as far as boutique hotels go? Are you actively searching for others? I know it looks like you've invested in some other hotels.
Yeah, so we're invested across 6 hotels. One of them is our own.
Right.
And next is just scaling up the portfolio. But I'm fortunate that now I'm in a position where I only want to do deals with people I like and on deals that are interesting to me. So I love not, of course, like the cash flow and appreciation and all the other great things that come with real estate, but I really enjoy the creative process of providing an experience to people that have never been provided before. So I love working with people who bring me deals, and now I'm excited to be in a position where I can help people like the mentor that helped me. We brought him deals, and he basically eventually said like, yeah, I'll go in on this with you. And now I'm enjoying getting to do that with other people and things like that.
And I'm sure you get a lot of feedback with your podcast as well. You're meeting a lot of interesting people and developing relationships just like I do with this one. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the podcast, right? I have a selfish reason and a selfless reason. The selfless reason is I love sharing information and knowledge with the world. If I'm going to capture information and it's free to give out, I might as well give it out. But then also meeting great people like you. Like a lot of my closest friends now are people that I've met from having on my podcast, and I've been on their podcast. So it's a great opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, same here. Before we started recording, we chatted about some topics we could get into besides building teams, which we've started on, which was very interesting. That tech background for teams is extraordinary. But you also mentioned aligning incentives. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there's an expression that you should be cautious of advice that you receive from somebody who doesn't have skin in the game. And so with that in mind, one of the best ways to create those asymmetric returns like we talked about is to bring somebody on your team who has a strong track record. Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to find someone who's done the thing that you're trying to do. You want to align incentives, and then you want to bring them on your team so that you can deliver the same value that they've done previously. And so I like employing what I call the mentor feedback loop or the mentor flywheel, which is effectively step number 1 is you conduct active listening with the mentor that you want to build relationships with. So you don't want to ask them if you can pick their brain. Nobody worth having their brain picked wants to sit down.
I've heard that so many times I can't even tell you.
It drives me nuts. The other thing that's common that drives me nuts is at the end of a conversation when someone says, how can I add value to you? You never want to say that to a mentor because, of course, there are a million ways that you can add value to them, but you don't want them to have to put on their HR hat. Now you've given them a job to do. Now they have to learn about you and see where you fit into what they're trying to do. So step number 1 is you conduct active listening. So you say things like, what are your goals? What are your biggest challenges? What are you working towards? And so my partners and I, we applied that with other experts in the space. And we effectively said, what are you trying to do? What are you going for? What are your challenges? And conducting active listening to deeply understand them and their pain points. And then through us understanding ourselves, went out and delivered value without them even asking. So a lot of our mentors that were interested in scaling their portfolios, what they were looking for was deal flow. So my partners and I said, okay, cool. So we went out, we looked for deals, and we brought them to the mentors. And then step number 2 of delivering.
Is that how you got in those 5 other hotels?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So build the relationships with mentors and then ended up deploying capital into those properties. Okay. So step number 1 is conduct active listening. Step number 2 is deliver value without them even asking. And then step number 3 is to get feedback on that value. And then you just continue the loop. So for perfect example, what we did with our first acquisition is we brought the deal to a bunch of people. One of them who ended up being our partner, his name is Neil Shaw. He has 25 years of experience, doubled the value of all 13 properties he's had within just a couple years. Insane track record in the space.
Boutique hotels.
Boutique hotels.
Gotcha.
Well, both flagged and boutique hotels. So he has a wide range portfolio. So basically, we'd bring deals to him, and he would say, oh, I don't like that deal because it has a restaurant. We'd say, cool. So we'd add no restaurant to our criteria. We'd go out, hunt more deals. We'd bring them back. And we'd say, what do you think about this one? He'd say, oh, I don't like that one because I'm looking for a minimum of a 20% internal rate of return. We'd say, okay. So through this process, we were doing multiple things. Number one, we were building rapport with Neil. Number two, we were better understanding what we were looking for in the space and basically mind melding with him to understand what created his success. And through this process over and over again, we eventually brought him a deal that fit all of his criteria. And we said, cool, you want to come in on it with us? And by that point, we had built a relationship. He had seen our work ethic. He had seen how we approach things. And so he ended up coming in on the deal. And that makes everything easier, right? It makes raising capital easier. It makes lending easier. We had banks chasing us, begging us to give, to take their money. And this was a year and a half ago when interest rates were much higher. We got incredible terms on everything. And so basically, like, the general approach is if you cast a big enough vision and you bring the right mentors on and the right rock stars on, it makes everything easier.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, I've got a coaching mentorship program called My Warriors, and they own. Our count is, I think, 265,000 units now under my tutelage, and that's just multifamily. It doesn't even count. We have hotels, boutique hotels as well.
Nice.
Yeah, got one in Punta Cana that I know of off the top of my head, but self-storage, thousands of units, senior housing, which I'm getting into in a big way, student housing, mobile home parks, you name it, all asset classes. And the same dynamic applies, because they're experts in the group now. And so that is kind of building on itself. I've got dozens of sponsors in the group now that the newbies can go to, bring a deal, and do this mentor loop you're describing. So I love that. I'm gonna share that, if you don't mind. I'll share that with my warriors because I think it's a great strategy for them to connect with successful warriors in the group and do it the right way.
Yeah.
Rather than doing the way you described. How can I add value to you? Yeah. Well, make me work. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So no, I love it. I absolutely love it. So I want to circle back to the tech. Okay. You said that you implemented tech in a fourplex. What tech can you do in a fourplex? Help me out here.
Yeah. So surprisingly or not surprisingly, the short-term rental space is a lot more advanced technologically than the hotel space.
Okay.
And so now a lot of the tech that was in short-term rentals are being applied to hotels.
Door locks.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Stuff.
So basically what we set up is we leverage a tool called Guesty, which is basically like the central hub that everything integrates into.
This is off-the-shelf software for this STR space.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And that tool specifically makes sense for hotels for reasons we could talk about. But for the short-term rental specifically, since you asked, we've automated everything, and we're applying those automations to our hotel currently.
So just to be clear, I was assuming long-term rental on the fourplex. This is a short-term rental fourplex.
This is a short-term rental.
Gotcha. Okay, I need that.
So that's actually what
Okay.
caused me to make that leap was we basically operated the fourplex like a small boutique hotel. And I mean, it was such a no-brainer, and I like the fast pace of things because it was more like tech. And so from there, I said we should just blow this thing up and scale as big as possible. So that's why we ended up scaling up into boutique hotels.
So just so that people understand what we're talking about here, I know you can use tech for the door lock entry system, exit system, camera system. I'm guessing HVAC. What else? Is there anything else that you use it? Well, the ordering. Reservation piece?
Yeah, so the biggest thing in terms of hospitality is automating everything from the guest booking to the guest checking out and leaving.
Gotcha.
So there are a lot of guests that we literally do zero work on.
Wow.
That they make the booking, we automatically send them the check-in information. We automatically program the locks so that when they arrive, they can get in.
They have their own special code.
Yeah, automatically schedule the cleaners so that they get their notifications.
Wow.
The cleaners code automatically works when the guest checks out and turns off when the guest checks back in.
Wow.
And so basically we have this full cycle. The only time we engage with our guests is if they can't find something or they have a one-off question
Okay, very cool. And you're doing the same thing with the boutique hotel.
We are. We're doing
cool.
the same thing with the boutique hotel. The boutique hotel with our approach for this specific asset is a little bit different because it's more high touch.
Okay.
So it is an upscale hotel. So we do have somebody at the front desk to make sure that people are there because we want that human touch for that property specifically.
Got it.
But we do leverage what's called a staff light model, which is effectively we operate the hotel with less staff than a traditional hotel, which is another great area of value add, which we could dive into also.
Well, sure. Because it improves the bottom line.
Totally.
So that when you can pick up a hotel, introduce tech, and minimize the employee base, I mean, hello, it's a no-brainer. By the way, just saw an article today in one of the news channels that I don't like. I won't go there, but talking about how a lot of hotels don't know how they're going to do business in California because of the $30 minimum wage that I think is about to pass. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah. And so like we're seeing a lot of the older school operators get impacted by that. Of course, everybody's impacted by that.
It ties into what you were just talking about, though. What a great segue to incorporate what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. Right? Yeah. And there are multiple opportunities like that. So I can list off a couple quick ones.
Okay.
So one of the biggest differentiators that I like pointing out between short-term rentals and hotels is that in commercial real estate, as you know, assets are based on the value that they generate.
Right.
So you can add tremendous value without swinging a single hammer. Perfect example is when we acquired the property, half of the units did not have hot water. And so of the guests that didn't have hot water, about half of them requested refunds. So our property was losing about $46,000 a year.
Wow.
We spent $300 on a plumber to go swap out a single valve. We got all the hot water running again. And because our property, it runs off of a 7.5% cap rate. Cap rates are higher in hospitality than in multifamily.
Sure.
We added over $600,000 in value to that property, literally by paying somebody $300 to swap out the valve.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities like that. There's opportunities of.
Well, that's kind of an unusual one. I mean, I think they're probably, to talk about something that might be more common.
Okay.
So to give an example, if you've got one.
Yeah, I do. So another one is dynamic pricing. So hotels, the prices fluctuate between busy season, slow season, weekends, weekdays.
Gotcha.
Our hotel was run off of static pricing. So it was run by a 90-year-old lady who was ready to retire, and she ran it the way you would imagine a 90-year-old lady would. It had static pricing. The units were not online at all.
Wow.
So it was just direct bookings through Google. And so we probably added about $250,000 in value just from hiring somebody at $20 an hour to put everything online and to integrate our dynamic pricing.
So dynamic pricing, guys, means the pricing adjusts based on the what's happening in that marketplace, based on occupancy, all sorts of things. And in fact, I'm pretty sure California is suing dynamic pricing in the multifamily space because people get together on the pricing there's some lawsuits in California right now for dynamic pricing for rentals. That's a great example. Again, because any improvement to the bottom line is an exponential improvement to the value.
Right.
And the higher the cap rate, the more that value increases. Yeah. In fact, in the senior housing space that I'm getting into, we're like at 10.5 cap. Yeah. So what's next? Are you going to find some more boutique hotels?
Yeah. Next is so I'm beginning to dump out content as much as I can.
Right.
That's why I love it on podcasts,
right.
Social media as much as I can, and really just get the story out there and pour as much value into people as possible. Like nothing that I talk about is like there's no secret sauce in any of it, right? Like you can find it on YouTube and books and everything else. What I'm trying to do is synthesize the best strategies that I have found for someone who's trying to jump into the space and jumpstart as quickly as possible without, I didn't have a lot of capital getting into the space. We just poured all of our capital into the fourplex. So I had about $20,000 that I put down on earnest money, and then my partners put down for earnest money as well. And then when we closed the hotel, we distributed about just under $250,000 in acquisition fees to all of us. And I ended up putting that money into the hotel for that one.
That was your skin in the game.
Yeah, that was my skin in the game. So basically like leveraging things like that where I DM a lot of people who ask me questions, and it's typically they can't find deals or they can't find capital. And both of those are very solvable problems, leveraging what you talk a lot about, which is like the mindset. Like ask yourself, how do I solve this problem rather than like I can't solve this problem or why can't I?
The how word is
exactly.
That's how you start the sentence. Yeah. Love it. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, brother, you and your lovely bride. And guys, check out his podcast, The Hunt for Incredible. I love that title, by the way. And
Thank you.
And yeah, so I really appreciate you coming down. I'm looking forward to actually being a guest on your show.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thank you. So guys, if you want to reach out to Gideon, his Instagram is GideonSpencer_. So make sure you check that out as well. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Thanks, man.